Welcome to episode 38 of the Sports Geek podcast. On this week's podcast, we chat with Daniel McLaren from the UK Sports Network on all things Digisport in the UK. And we take a look at what is happening online at the Sochi Olympics.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for the sports digital marketer. And now, here's your host, currently crafting Facebook ads so your friends will find out about this podcast, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. And I do love a good, well-targeted Facebook ad. Might actually talk about that Facebook fraud video a little bit later in the show. Really good response from my good friend John Loomer. On this week's show, we have a chat to Daniel McLaren from the UK sportsnetwork.com on all things Digisport, which is the way that they tag it. We do discuss the business of hashtags in our discussion. And then also later on, I'm going to catch up with Francis Leach on all things Sochi and Sochi problems, which is both a hashtag and a Twitter account. And a little bit more on athlete activism. But first, here's my chat with Daniel McLaren from the UK sportsnetwork.com. I'm very pleased to welcome to this week's Sports Geek podcast, all the way from the UK, from the UK sportsnetwork.com, Dan McLaren. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Great to speak to you, Sean.
Not a problem. Well, first of all, I just wanted to give a bit of background into your website and sort of how it evolved. So the people who are listening who haven't checked it out, the uksportsnetwork.com, do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. It's actually been going now for just over 4 years. We just had our fourth kind of anniversary last month. But originally it started, I've always worked in sports. So I did my degree in sports studies back in the late 90s. I worked in sports event management for a few years. So I worked in table tennis, snooker, and golf primarily, and then did a stint as within sponsorship at a Glamorgan Cricket Club. So it's pretty much been sport all the way through. And then I had a spell working for myself, and I'd got a little bit more into social media, got onto Twitter, and then onto LinkedIn, and set up a group called UK Sports Network because no one else was really talking about anything on that platform at that time. So, and then that was in December 2009, I think. And then the following month, I thought, what's the next iteration for this? And a website was the kind of the next obvious step for it. What can I give back to people, and what can I start talking about? And originally started off as a sports business website for 6 months. But my interests were getting more and more into social media. There was a lot of other people in the space talking about general sports business as well. So literally, I didn't look at my Google Analytics for a good 3 months after I made the switch. And then when I did look, I was quite pleasantly surprised to see that I was actually getting more traction than from before, which was superb. So yeah, from there, it's been going for since 3.5 years now of just talking social media, digital media, and sport. And from that, I mean, it's just kind of gone leaps and bounds, and I've ended up working for some great companies, and now I've made the switch to it's actually being my full-time project.
Well, it's very similar to the Sports Geek story in that coming from an IT background and effectively just starting blogging about the space. And I remember back in those times, 2009, 2010, 2011, there wasn't many players sort of out there putting out their opinions in that space, and you were one definitely doing that in the UK side of things. How do you think, looking back at those early times when it was a lot of learning how to use the platforms and how to use it effectively, and a few of the teams were sceptical. I mean, we've seen, only in the last 6 months that Manchester United have finally joined Twitter. How have you seen that evolve in the UK, where now social, for mine, is now completely integrated into digital if a team is doing it right, and it's not this little outpost where people are doing these cool little things. It's now going to be part of a broader strategy as part of your digital strategy. How have you seen that development over the past 4 years?
I remember one of the first posts that we did, which was by Ash Reed, who still writes and does some great things in the space as well. And he actually did a league table of who had Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, because we didn't look further than that at that stage. And probably about 2/3 of the top division in the Premier League had a social media presence. And now we're talking all 92 teams are on both of them at least, across numerous other platforms. Non-league teams, amateur teams are all in there. So it's gone from being a little bit of a novelty where a few teams, Liverpool were probably the one that picked up and ran with it more than most at the start. And I probably, wrote a lot more about those guys. And then, Manchester United have always been the big brand, and they're always sat and waited. And I think that's still going to be their ploy now. Last year they employed their first kind of social media specific person about, not even a year ago now. And they're starting to talk a bit more about what they're doing, but they're still going to be very, very cautious in what they do, sit there and wait, see what other people are doing well, and then seeing how they can do it better and what they can learn from it. So, I mean, I think Manchester City have probably made the biggest splash in the last kind of 2 or 3 years. Richard Ayres, when he first started there, their viewpoint was that they were a local brand trying to go global. So they had to do something different. They were never going to get the initial reach and traction of a Manchester United or a Liverpool or even an Arsenal. So they had to almost start from scratch. And social media led the way for that. And they found, hitting the numbers, which it was about then, we've got 100,000 people on here or 1 million. We've just broken 1 million on Facebook. Those were the stories back then.
Yep.
And, we've seen it move on from there. And I think my views have certainly changed. And the more I've got to know about it, I suppose the deeper the stories and the insights have tended to go as we kind of move away from those more simplistic, kind of almost not link-based, the easy headlines that we try. I desperately try and avoid those these days.
Yeah, I think one of the key points for the Manchester United story for mine was they came out so strong on why they weren't on Twitter early on. They sort of said there was something to the words of the effect, we don't see an economic benefit or a return on investment on why they were doing it. And there was a lot of leap of faith by a lot of teams, and there still is on using social on why are we doing it, what is the return, and so they sort of put up this, we're not going on Twitter till we know we can make money off Twitter. So everyone was sort of waiting, well, as soon as Manchester United on Twitter, they must know how to do it. And of course they don't. They're now just tweeting like everybody else and realizing that it does drive traffic, it builds brand awareness, it raises level of attachment to the club, and there does become revenue down the track of driving more people to your activations and things like that. But making a bold statement like that to we're not using this platform till we can figure out how to monetize it. It's a much better strategy to follow the Liverpool, the Arsenal, the Man City of getting out there, testing, and that's one of the key things to see what your fans like, and you can monetize after that. And I think that's where now these more fully fledged digital activations where they're sending people either back to a responsive website so it works on mobile or back to a sponsor's website or activation. That's where they're starting to monetize digital. And I agree. I think we're getting away from the celebratory, we've reached this many followers. It's not so much about that anymore. And the focus should be on, delivering to the goals around the campaigns and driving traffic to your site, because the numbers are going to keep going up.
The clubs will always celebrate the big numbers. I mean, Juve have just hit 10 million on Facebook and produced a video for that with Carlos Tevez. I mean, it's a nice little headline for them, and it gives them something to kind of celebrate internally within the club and celebrate with the fans and get the fans involved.
Yeah,
Um,
I do. I mean, I agree. It's a great content piece, and the fans do celebrate it a bit. I know working with multiple clubs, I still sometimes shake my head at how much they're looking over the fence at the other clubs, and what their numbers are, and we've done studies both from a Facebook and a Twitter point of view. Like, there's no way that you can convert a Man City fan to be a Man United fan. So really, you should be really focused on your fans. And I think that that Man City example before you were giving, they're not going to get the Manchester United numbers. But if they engage and find and reach all the Man City fans, then they're doing their job. So it's you can't go and compare yourselves to the bigger clubs that have the bigger reach. You want to really make sure you focus on your fans completely.
Yeah, and they came up with quite a they place themselves as being an innovative brand. They almost created the brand perception through social media and what they were doing through that, and really pushed it on the PR front and what they were doing heavily as well. And it's kind of worked for them.
Yeah, and it is different for different platforms. Like, what we've found is, and I'm sure it's the same in the UK, most sports followers will follow all the teams because it's such on Twitter, because it's a news resource. They want to know what's happening for that opposition team, especially when they're playing against them. They want to be able to take every opportunity to trash talk or put down that team if they make a mistake or have a bad game. But on Facebook, we're definitely finding, and again, I think it's just the way that Mark Zuckerberg set it up. Putting a like button on a team, and it's like, from an AFL point of view, the Australian rules. I'm a Collingwood fan, and so it's very hard for me to say that I like, my crosstown rivals, the Carlton Football Club, because it goes against every single thing I do, and so. I think the Facebook numbers have a truer representation of your fan base. I think we are exceptions, and most of the people listening to the podcast are exceptions because we follow and like every single page just to keep up to date with everyone's doing. But I think the everyday man in the street, from a Facebook point of view, they really only just like their team. So it just sort of shows that the numbers are different for different reasons on different platforms.
No, definitely. I mean, Facebook is a lot more. It's a lot more public, isn't it? Because you have the people can see what you've liked, and you're almost a lot of people. That was one of the kind of downsides of Facebook, how they were doing it. To some respect, is fans were liking it because I'm a Manchester United fan. I would like it, but just to show my allegiance to the club, but never visit the page and never interact with anything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kind of lay fans on there that are just doing it for the badge, whereas. It's not as public on Twitter, so you're not doing it as a declaration. You are generally following it to have news on it or try and interact with a Q&A or something like that.
So one of the things that I always look to do, and I've done it a couple of times in the US, you can analyse social and digital from afar. The access to the internet, you can see what all the teams are doing. But I'm a really big believer in offline is a really big part of digital. And, I've sort of really been banging that drum for a couple of years now, because, when you go to a game, you see the fans that are your super avid fans. They're the ones that are taking their money out of the pocket and buying tickets and merchandise. They're the ones you want to engage with, as opposed to potentially the lazier fan that's just sitting on the couch that's, retweeting your tweets, but not engaging financially with the club. So again, if we're looking at rewards and return on investment, you want the fan that's invested financially in your team. So I've had a few trips to the States, and I'm really looking forward to, in April and May, coming over to the UK and Europe, and hopefully catching up with a few teams, and also catching up with yourself. You want to tell us a little bit about some of the about the UK sports scene and I guess the London scene and what I might expect?
Yeah, definitely. Part of my background was event management, so it's one of the obvious things for me to do was to start running events. And my other excuse for it was I'm a rubbish networker. So if people, if you're running the event, you don't have to introduce yourself. People already know who you are. So it kind of breaks down those barriers in conversation. So it's one of my kind of lazier excuses. But we've been running events for a good 3 years over here. So we've had some half-day, full-day events, and more recently we started Digital Sport London, which runs at the end of every month. And this month will be number 5. So we started it kind of as I concentrated on UK Sports Network in the middle of last year. And so we have different themes for different ones, different special guests. So last month we had a panel that included a couple of people, both from rugby and from football. So it was a really interesting one, looking at community management. And then we had We Are Social, which is one of the big agencies, and they have an office over in Sydney as well.
Yep.
And they from my old Adidas team, came over and did a quick presentation on it. So we kind of looked to vary them up a little bit. A couple of previous ones, we've done Skype calls with a couple of people. So one of them was Shergill from AS Roma, which is really entertaining, just to get, as you want to come over and see what's happening with the different teams over here. It proved a nice way of getting to know what different people were doing elsewhere in the world, whether it be in the States or mainland Europe. A little bit harder with Australia with the time difference, though.
It is. But if I'm looking forward. Hopefully, we're sort of in the process of trying to organise it. Hopefully, I can make your DS London event when I'm there in April. It'll definitely help me book less meetings if I can meet everybody in the one night.
There's a good mix of agencies in there, and so we get a few people from the old club and federation coming along as well. But I think you'll find it. Some things will be quite familiar, but other things will be quite different. I mean, you mentioned before about being a big fan of the kind of offline and teams, interacting with their kind of most loyal fans at the stadiums, and those that are paying the money to come along. I think in the UK it's almost gone the other way a little bit. So most of the social media effort, especially, has been concentrated on chasing new fans in new territories.
Yeah.
So they're almost saying that we've got the fans who come every week. We don't need to worry about them. They're taken care of. Let's go and entertain. So all the second screen, all the interaction is based around the people who are watching on TV, rather than those coming to the stadiums.
And it definitely, that strategy, fits for the, whatever the team that you're talking about. So it's very similar to what we do with the West Coast Eagles. Because they have a very similar setup to a lot of the UK football teams, in that they've got a full stadium and they've got a season ticket waiting list, and they can't get any more people into the stadium. That stadium, we spoke to Matt Jepp from the Eagles on the podcast previously, and that's an older demographic that are in their stadium, so they're not super tech savvy. So really, we're using social to attract and retain that next generation of fans that will fill the stadium in 10 years' time. So, there's different ways you can use social, and it's just a matter of having that focus of what you're trying to do. I just wanted to ask you, what are your plans for the UK Sports Network, going forward? Have you got anything on the horizon for the next 12 months that you're looking to achieve?
A lot is kind of. The site has looked the same apart from the odd tweak here and there, it hasn't changed in 4 years. So it's definitely starting to creak a little bit. But so the plan is this year, I'm in the process of putting together a new website, which is going to be something very, very different. So what it's going to be is more of an aggregator rather than just our own content.
Yep.
So hopefully we'll feature some of your content on there as well.
Happy to.
So it involves some of the links. So click off to links to read other articles and other websites. Some of our own content that we'll write for this website. Integrate some tweets, integrate some videos in there. It should just be, a lot more. I know the phrase that a lot of people use on websites, sticky.
Yep.
Having different things happening during the day, because I sit there and read. I don't know how many articles a day from different websites. So, it's not that much extra for me to just, upload that onto my own website so other people. So I'm almost filtering the content. So we're looking at doing that, doing more digital sport events, taking them around. So I'm hoping to go up to Glasgow soon and then roll them out to kind of Manchester and Newcastle, and different areas around the UK. I'd love to try and roll it out globally as well, and try and get some meetups going around the world.
Terrific.
And the UK Sports Network as a name in a few months, all going to plan, won't exist.
Okay.
So we will become just digital sport.
Cool. Oh, it actually does lead to, I guess, one discussion, being from the UK, and you probably have seen it as well, is just the different hashtags around, I guess, the sports biz. And one of them is, sports biz is sort of the overarching grandfather, the hashtag, I guess, for the industry overall, where you can get really varied discussion. But there seems to be a real skew for the DigiSport hashtag, which I see that as the, again, encompasses everything from a sports digital point of view, to be really skewed to Europe and the UK and Australia, and not so much in the US, whereas they tend to use the SM Sports hashtag. I mean, I see the SM Sports as social media in sports, and again a niche inside digital sport as opposed to that. I mean, there's no right way of why you should use a hashtag, but just I thought I'd explain it to everyone on the podcast. That's how I use it. But I've definitely seen, because I do watch both the UK, US, and Australian markets, that there is a definite, I guess, slant that DigiSport seems to be a European, Australian hashtag more so than the US.
Yeah, I follow both, and I have used DigiSports more, but I have to admit recently I've started using SM Sports more. DigiSport, it definitely seems to have a mainland European kind of feel to it. There's a lot of French, German, Italian content on there.
Yep.
Which tends to, so you get a very diverse range of languages on there as well. So the content's very diverse and the language is very diverse. SM Sports is very much, kind of US-led with some UK and Australian content. So it tends to be a lot more kind of English language ones in there. But they're both definitely worth a follow, just to kind of keep up. Have your tweet deck open and have them both side by side and see what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, they are the three sort of, people ask me who to follow from a Twitter point of view, and to a lesser extent other platforms that allow hashtags, and I pretty much give those three hashtags as, start there, and you'll definitely start seeing. It was definitely the case in 2009, 2010 and the like. That's how we all connected and found each other, because we all started using those hashtags. Yeah,
I think it's one thing that people who are just kind of doing more in the industry, especially the senior guys, they're quite surprised in how small the industry is, that everyone knows everyone. So even around the world, we all know a lot of guys. I think Melbourne is probably the place that I know more people outside of London in terms of cities.
Yep.
Because I know Anthony Allsop over at Richmond, a good friend of mine, Adam Vincenzini, who's moved back from the UK back to Melbourne as well.
Yep.
So it's definitely one of the places. I think if anyone came up with a job offer and I was kind of looking at something, I think Melbourne would probably be the one place that would tempt me away from where I am at the moment, I think.
Well, we do have the we do try to claim that it's the sporting capital of the world. I think if there's any city that could vigorously debate that, I think it would be London. I think sorry to all my US friends, but you just don't have enough major events and enough major sports teams in the one city. Even if you stacked up New York to both London and Melbourne, and they did a terrific job with the Super Bowl recently. They just don't have as many football teams that run out every single week, as well as having Grand Slam tennis and Formula One and all those kind of things. So, yep, we'll call it a draw because you're a guest on the show. But I will still say that Melbourne's the sporting capital of the world.
I'm not going to completely deny that one, but London is great.
Okay, Dan. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. Look forward to seeing where the UKSportsNetwork.com develops, and I look forward to catching up with you when I'm in the UK in April.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you very much for having me. And we look forward to having you as a guest at the next Digital Sport London.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
thanks again to Dan McLaren from the UKSportsNetwork.com for that chat. I'm looking forward to catching up with him. We have now confirmed when DS London will happen. It's going to be on April 22nd in London, so a couple of days after I arrive in London. You can grab your tickets now. Just go to the link via sportsgeekhq.com/DS London. I'm looking forward to catching up with a few people over in England and learning a little bit more about the English digisport market and what's happening over there. This week on ABC Grandstand, I had a chat to Francis just before the Olympics got started about all things Sochi and what was happening online. So here's my chat with Francis Leach on ABC Grandstand.
Francis Leach with you here. Sean Callanan's the digital sports guru from Sports Geek HQ, and he's here to talk to us about sport in the digital realm once again. Hey, Shawnee, how you going?
I'm good, thanks, Frank.
The Winter Olympics and the Olympic movement's militancy against media sharing is once again in the spotlight. We can't play any audio from any Olympic events, and certainly ABC TV can only play snippets of it on the news. Not, say, tomorrow morning on Offsiders. We'll probably have to do a reenactment of some of the events with Lego or something. But surely in the age of digital media, this can't continue. In social media where you can film things on your phone and send it around the world in a blink of an eye, these archaic rules surely are going to crumble.
Well, that's definitely the case. I mean, everyone who's there is just fans, can take photos, can take short-form video now with both Instagram and Vine, if they can get some coverage. I've got a friend over there who's helping out with the ice skating as part of the technical team, and, she's sharing photos and videos, sort of daily updates just for everyone and her friends. So there will be content coming out. So it does make it tough for the IOC, and, it is a bit draconian, I guess, to a certain degree, and they haven't really caught up with what social media is offering. But on the other side, they also are promoting it with, like, they've got an athletes hub where you can go and see what all the athletes are sharing. So if you go to, I think it's hub.olympics.org, you can see all the tweets and Instagram posts and those kind of things from all the athletes.
So it's like a information exchange where it all congregates and aggregates together, and you can just sort of like be in the digital Olympic village.
Effectively. Even though a lot of the athletes had a lot of restrictions, there was a bit of furor early with the Australian athletes sort of getting their back up and saying, well, I don't want to be told what I can and can't tweet. There was some security reasons around that. They didn't want the athletes to be sort of giving away their location and those kind of things for security concerns, but. Once the games start, the athletes will share their emotions and those kind of things. And as we saw with London, as long as they don't spend too much time reading their own Twitter feed and concentrate on their events, they'll do okay.
Elsewhere on Twitter, there's a fascinating one going on here because, Sochi 2014 will be giving you the official view of how things are going. But there's another Twitter account, Sochi Problems, which is outpacing it in terms of interest, which probably says a lot more about what people want from the Olympic Games, which is stories of disaster and problems.
So the hashtag Sochi Problems was something that was definitely trending early on as journalists and attendees and fans started arriving in Sochi, and so a young enterprising Toronto journalism student started the handle, as you do now because Twitter finds itself in the parody space a lot, Sochi Problems, and has pretty much just been retweeting and tweeting some of the comical things that are happening around the village and some of the issues. And now it has over 250,000 followers because it's gone viral. And it has been sharing things like people, turning on a tap thinking they're getting warm apple cider, and that's just the colour of the water. And if you haven't seen, there's the toilets with two toilets per stall.
I want to see that for myself. I still think that's been photoshopped.
No, that's I've seen a fair few photos of that from different angles.
I want to hear the logic behind the synchronised pooing.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully that's not a new Olympic sport, but this is where the IOC doesn't get to control, I guess, all the content that's coming out and the message. And so, I'm sure the organisers are trying to get everything right, and hopefully when the actual games start, as they have, and the events start, they will, that will be the main show. And hopefully this kind of content that's coming out will die down. But as we sort of spoke about with the Super Bowl last week, social media presents a real opportunity and a risk from a customer service point of view. And I think this is where the IOC and the social organisers have sort of let themselves down in that sense, where there's so much content being out there and not really being on top of it. It's not about, stopping that content. You can't stop people taking pictures of, showers that are too short, holes in walls, windows that aren't finished, that kind of thing. But if you have someone monitoring that and responding to that, there's a better chance that people have a better experience.
Sean Callanan from Sports Geek HQ with us here on Grandstand Breakfast. The other element to this has been the political nature of these games. There's no doubt that the issues, particularly around gay and lesbian rights, is massive, and it's sort of been, something the IOC wants to avoid because it's always tried to have a neutral political position. But inevitably, people are finding ways online to express their discontent with Russia's current laws.
Yeah, and so, I think that's definitely going to be the case. There's been a few athletes that have sort of bit their tongue for the time being, but they also know that if they do get their moment, on the Olympic stage, that they do have an opportunity to make a statement. And one organisation that's already made a rather big statement, I think, is Google. And this is where they're operating outside, I guess, the IOC's guidelines. And each day, when you go to google.com.au, wherever you go, they normally will change the header. And it's called the Google Doodle. And it's just a little artwork that they put to represent their logo. And they normally change it out for Christmas and big events and that kind of thing. And so yesterday they changed it out with an Olympic-themed header, but it was in rainbow colours. So it was a really not so subtle statement and a dig to the Olympic movement that they were supporting gay and lesbian rights and those kind of things, and they didn't have to adhere to the IOC. Subtle
and very clear what the message was. And before we let you go, ambush marketing is massive when it comes to these events.
Yeah, and I think it extends to the activism online. So a lot of the marketers around the Olympics, especially in the US, so McDonald's and Coca-Cola ran some campaigns on Twitter with specific hashtags, and the gay and lesbian rights movement sort of wanted to put them back in their place to say, well, hang on, you're supporting these Olympics that are having these issues in Sochi and not really present. And both of those campaigns had to sort of just get pulled because activists were there saying, we don't want to...
You can't walk both sides of the street.
Exactly. So I guess the opportunity there is for people to have their say, and athletes will do the same. So from a marketing point of view, you've got to be careful of what type of events you're going to support.
Where can we find you online today?
SportsGeekHQ.com or Sports Geek Podcast on iTunes.
And just finally, what Olympic sport in the winter realm are you looking forward to most?
I'm looking forward to seeing David Morris in the aerial skiing.
Are you a skier yourself?
No, I'm not a skier. Never been a skier, but his dad got in trouble for holding up the boxing kangaroo and defended it staunchly. So
he's our man.
I'm definitely behind him.
We're right behind him. Good on you, Sean.
Like the Sports Geek Podcast? Find us on Facebook.com/SportsGeek.
So Sochi Games are in full swing. Absolute stack of content coming out of the games as expected. But one little hiccup that's sort of happened here in Australia is around Rule 40. And Rule 40 is in place to protect, as part of the Olympic Charter, to protect Olympic sponsors. And so the Rule 40 is no competitor, coach, trainer or official who participates in the Olympic Games may not allow his person name, picture or sports performance be used for advertising purposes during the Olympic Games blackout period. Now, there are obviously rules around what media outlets can use the footage and things like that around the Games. But this is where the story is sort of developed, where it appears the Australian Olympic Committee has been policing Rule 40 and telling Australian ski resorts to stop tweeting about the performances of the athletes, which is quite strange because it was pretty much everyone on Twitter is congratulating the athletes, and unfortunately for Mount Hotham and Perisher and the like, they're trying to thank the athletes who train and they support via their resorts, and it's sitting there trying to protect the sponsors, but for mine, it just seems to have gone a little bit too far in as far as what protection Olympic sponsors need. So I do pity the person that has to trawl through every single tweet to find out if they're breaking Rule 40. But what I did after reading Miss Snow It All's blog, what I did wonder is, well, where does Twitter itself sit in this place? Is it quite okay for Twitter or Twitter Australia to send out a tweet congratulating Tora Bright? They are a commercial platform. They are making money off people advertising and tweeting during the Olympics. It's a very murky area from a legal point of view. And it's a bit too far in this day and age. And it's a case where Rule 40 hasn't quite caught up with what social media offers from a sports point of view. A really funny parody video from the guys at Perisher, which I'll have a link to the show notes, where they thank non-athletes by not naming them at the non-Olympics. So that leads me to the sounds of the game, and sticking with the Olympic theme, here is some sounds of the game. Yes, that's right. I was going to take some audio from an Instagram video from people sharing around the stadium, but that would break the IOC's guidelines. I did have a friend send through some sound from the half-pipe competition, but again, I did not want to get her in trouble. Again, can't stress it enough that it is just an opportunity wasted by the IOC not letting fans share content and just loosen their rights a little bit. But that's enough of that. For those of you who thought I'd broken the podcast like I did last week, thank you to David and Dan who notified me that I'd left a whole track on silent. So if you were listening to episode 37 and you wondered where the audio went, it has been fixed. So apologies there. If you re-download that episode, you can hear that interview that was missing. So that's pretty much it for on all things Olympics, and I'm not going to talk any more about the Olympics in case I do get in trouble. One of the things for the social media post of the week, I'm going to give it to Juventus from Dan's nomination in our interview. Have a check out of the YouTube clip for their 10 million likes on Facebook. Well worth looking at. And on Facebook, I don't know if you have seen, if you've been living under a rock, you wouldn't have seen it, but you should have seen the Facebook fraud video that was doing the rounds and pretty much saying Facebook advertising is terrible, and you get poor results by using Facebook advertising. I watched the video and did my own studies, and then I also followed up with John Loomer. I've spoken about John Loomer before. I'll put his link to the show note. His response has been the best response I've seen to that Facebook fraud video. I completely agree. If you write bad ads and you target bad ads, then you will get bad fans, if that's a proper way to put it, or a disengaged fan base. So, yeah, I definitely suggest you listen to John. He actually did a podcast on it, sort of explaining his things. It primarily was around the targeting. There are so many more options available. As it said in the opener, the ability for me to target fans now for this podcast have changed in the last 18 months dramatically. One of the latest things are website custom audiences. I've turned that on. I haven't started running ads, but you can start now building a list of people who have visited your site and do it natively in Facebook, not using AdRoll or a third-party product. So plenty of options there from a sports point of view. I'm looking forward to both using them myself and also implementing them with clients. So if you're interested in the Facebook ad space, it's definitely developing and it's very exciting what it can offer. And the targeting options give you terrific value for money with what you're looking for. So the clock wind-up tells me it is time to dedicate this episode 38. It is getting tougher and tougher to nominate. To keep the English theme, 38 is the number of games each team in the English Premiership plays in a season, but I'm not going to use that as the number because the other famous 38 is Kurt Schilling, Major League Baseballer, who's probably his sock is almost as well known as his baseball ability. The bloody sock from the 2004 World Series, where the Boston Red Sox reversed the curse and finally won the World Series. Other news coming up. I haven't got the full details of it just yet. I'm going to be running a Sports Geek ODE. So you also know what an ODI is, a one-day international and a 50-50 over match in cricket. So I'm having a ODE. I'm calling it a one-day educational. So it's going to be a one-day educational event, sessions on all things social and digital. It's going to most likely be in early April before I go to the UK. It's going to have 4 sessions run by me on social media, understanding Facebook, diving into that ad stuff that I was just discussing, how to build a community and conversation on Twitter, and how to use Instagram to tell your business story and engage with your audience, as well as looking at all the tools you need to develop your business or your team online. So it'll be a bit wider audience than just sports, but I expect some grassroots sports and some business owners to be attending. So I'm going to keep the class pretty limited. I'm not going to make it a massive event. And additionally, so it's not me all day, and to give me a little bit of a break, I'm going to bring in two experts for some interviews on their take on digital strategy and content marketing and the like. So just locking all of that in now. I expect to have that out there probably next week. So if you're not on the Sports Geek News email list, you won't find out about it first. That's where I'm going to be launching it first and letting everybody know about it. And there will also be some early bird offers for the email newsletter list, and also for you, my podcast listeners. So thanks again for all the support. You'll get all the details for that, but you can sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now. And again, I've reconfigured the if you want to go into the archives, I've had to split up the archive. I've now got the Sports Geek podcast archive is at sportsgeekhq.com/sgp. You can get all the episodes at sportsgeekhq.com/episodes, and you can also connect and find out who the guests are who have been on the show. And again, thank you very much. I'll add Dan McLaren to that list this week. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/guests. That's it for this week. If you've got any feedback or anything, or sounds of the game or anything like that, please send me an email, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Closing 2 cents. This one goes out to the IOC and Rule 40. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Yes, I just quoted Ferris Bueller. They need to change the rule.
Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Find all Sports Geek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Want to maximize returns from your digital team? Contact Sports Geek about content and commercialization workshop. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.